Donna and Angie were student nurses and good friends who had decided to room together while in school, and for Donna's 28th birthday, her mom had gifted her a very large Raggedy Ann doll, something she was thrilled about. Soon after adopting the precious doll, Donna started to notice some weird behavior. She would leave Annabelle in her bed every morning behind her locked bedroom door, seating her the same way with her arms and legs crossed, and would come home at night to Annabelle having moved rooms and in positions that weren't possible. She's described a few instances of the doll kneeling, and speaking from experience, stuffed dolls can't kneel without falling for more than a few seconds. Donna and Angie then started finding notes left throughout the apartment, written on parchment paper in red pen, two things they didn't own. When Donna's boyfriend Lou started criticizing the doll, unexplainable handprints and scratches began appearing on his body. And that's when the girls made the decision to call a priest, who then brought in the Warrens. They were able to calm down the entity enough to remove it from the home and transport her to their museum, where she resides to this day. Now, the footage I'm talking about here is from the visitors who have visited Annabelle and her current residence over the years. If you look closely, you can just see the energy that's alive in her. Also, if she was never removed from her box until like the last few years, how is she able to change position ever so slightly from one video to the next? You tell me here. In fourth place, we have footage from a Buddhist exorcism. Known as parita, which can be translated as protection or safeguard, it refers to the Buddhist practice of reciting certain verses and scriptures in order to ward off misfortune or danger. The practice of reciting or listening to the parita suttas began very early in the history of Buddhism. The Mahavamsa contains the earliest historical reference to this practice, describing how Upatissa I instructed monks to recite the Ratana Sutta throughout the night during a period when Sri Lanka was afflicted by plague and diseases. In the Pali literature, these short verses are recommended by the Buddha as providing protection from certain afflictions. The belief in the effective power to heal or protect of the Sakakariya, or asseveration of something quite true, is an aspect of the work ascribed to the Parita. It is also widely believed that all-night recitations of Parita by monks bring safety, peace, and well-being to a community. Parita discourses can be recited at events like a funeral or on the death anniversary of a loved one, and can also be recited to placate antagonistic spirits. In 1987, Ed and Lorraine took a trip to Japan to offer their expertise in some cases that were ongoing in different parts of the country, with one of their stops being to a Buddhist temple. Describing everyone they encountered as lovely, Ed and Lorraine were shocked when they came upon not one, but two people under possession. Ed described one as being under the influence of a snake demon, as they slithered around the floor constantly with their tongue darting in and out of their mouth. The possessed people were blindfolded, so the demons couldn't witness the rites, as the Buddhas went through the rituals and chanted around them. After the spirits were cast out, a bonfire was built to help guide them towards the afterlife. The footage we see is from a later round of prayers, which was held because one of the sets of spirits refused initially to depart from her attached soul. You can hear Lorraine attempting to guide the spirit out with the aid of a translator, coaxing Teresa to go on to the light and fly away, that her family was no longer here. In third place, we have the elusive White Lady of Union Graveyard. Some believe she is Harriet Seeley, whose young son passed shortly after being born, and Harriet herself passing soon afterwards. Legend believes she may have died in hopes of finding her son, and still wanders their final resting place searching him out, while others believe she is the ghost of a woman from the 1940s who killed her husband and later herself and is doomed to wander the graveyard. You tell me which one you believe. Her physical description is the one thing that remains consistent. She is a young woman wearing a white dress with dark hair. Thank goodness I'm not wearing white today. It seems as if she enjoys scaring the daylights out of the living, which, hey, my kind of gal. Many who have witnessed her believe they have almost hit her with their vehicle, only to find no trace of her once they pull over, while others claim they have often seen her hovering slightly above the ground around the cemetery, going back and forth amongst different gravestones. In 1993, local firefighter Glenn Powell received a call about a transformer explosion and drove to the scene of the incident with a police officer and observed a female driver following closely behind him on the road. He remembers the night sky had turned pink, my favorite color, and the explosion emitted large amounts of electricity that had made the hair on his arm stand up at a close distance. Glenn was driving along the road beside the cemetery when the officer seated next to him yelled, "Watch out!" In the middle of the road was a woman with, you guessed it, long brown flowing hair and wearing a white Victorian nightgown. Glenn described seeing a surprised look on her face before slamming on the brakes, but was unable to avoid hitting her, describing it like hitting a brick wall, with the back of his truck flying into the air and the policeman next to him being launched into the dashboard. The driver behind him jumped out of the car and helped the two men search the area of the crash to check on the woman. Glenn is quoted as saying, "There was no red bodily fluids, there was no clothing, there was nobody, there was nothing." Located in Connecticut, Lorraine used to often take walks through the cemetery, saying that it was one of the most haunted places around. Ed caught the White Lady on camera on September 1st, 1990 at 2:40 a.m., his seventh night in a row of filming at the cemetery. Determined to have footage as proof, and we can show some of that footage to you now. He described dark figures surrounding her, shapes that he said were wood ghosts that seemed to jump on her while they all argued. In second place, we have the Amityville Horror. On November 13th of 1974, Ronald DeFeo Sr., his wife, and 4 of their offspring, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John, had their lives ended by a firearm inside their home in suburban Amityville, New York. And at the time, homicide detectives claimed it was the largest number of victims in a single slang on Long Island. The deceased were found in their nightclothes and were shot in the back, apparently while they were asleep. There were no signs of a struggle inside the home, where a sign hanging outside the main entrance read, "High hopes." Sure. The killings were reported by the only surviving member of the family, the oldest son, Ronald. He told the police that he arrived at the home shortly after 6 p.m. but found the front door locked, so he crawled into the house through a window and stumbled across the icky scene. He later confessed that he had ended the lives of his family around 3:30 a.m., acting out the scenes for detectives as he described how he took out his family one by one, with the weapon eventually being found in Amityville Creek. Ronald's trial began in October of 1975. His defense attorney, William Weber, tried to make a case that the defendant, who allegedly heard voices, was innocent by reason of insanity, but the court eventually sentenced him to 6 concurrent 25-year to life sentences. Try saying that 5 times fast. Eesh. A year later, the Lutz family moved into the now abandoned home, and that's where this goes from simply tragic to much, much more. Most of the DeFeo family's furniture was still in the house, because it was included for $400 as part of the deal. You know what, I'd take that deal too. A friend of George Lutz, the father of the family, had learned about the history of the house and insisted on having it blessed, and at the time, George was a non-practicing Methodist and had no experience of what this would entail. Kathy, the mom, was a non-practicing Catholic and explained the process to him. George knew a Catholic priest named Father Mancuso who agreed to carry out the house blessing. He arrived to perform the blessing while George and Kathy were unpacking their belongings on the afternoon of December 18th, 1975, and went into the home to carry out the rites. When he flicked the first amount of holy water and began to pray, he heard a masculine voice demand that he get out. When leaving the house, the priest did not mention this incident to either George or Kathy until December 24th, when he called George and advised him to stay out of the second-floor room where he had heard the mysterious voice, which happened to be the former bedroom of Mark and John DeFeo that Kathy had planned to use as a sewing room, but the call was cut short by static. Following his visit to the house, the father allegedly developed a high fever and blisters on his hands, similar to stigmata. At first, George and Kathy experienced nothing unusual in the house, but the horrors that happened over the next 28 days were awful for the Lutz family, bearing witness to slime pouring out of their walls, strange odors throughout the home, and George would wake up at 3:15 every morning, which is right around the time Ron DeFeo carried out his original crimes. A garage door would open and close on its own, an invisible spirit knocked a knife down in the kitchen, a pig-like creature with red eyes was reported staring at George and his son Daniel through a window. Also, Kathy and 2 of her children experienced bouts of levitation while trying to sleep. The footage we have from this heinous month is of a boy with glowing eyes, believed to be the spirit of the late John DeFeo. By mid-January of 1976, after another attempt at a house blessing by George and Kathy, they experienced what would be their final night in the house. Now, the Lutzes were never able to give a full account of the events that took place on this occasion, describing them as too frightening. After getting in touch with Father Mancuso, the Lutzes decided to take some belongings and stay at Kathy's mother's house in nearby Deer Park, New York, until they had sorted out the problems with the house. They claimed the phenomena followed them there, describing greenish-black slime coming up the staircase towards them. Yeah, no thanks. And finally, in first place, we have footage of an American exorcism. While the video is blurred out on YouTube to protect the identity of the poor girl, I personally think it's up there as one of the most frightening things I've ever seen. At an hour and 20 minutes long, it depicts a Catholic bishop in Connecticut attempting to converse with a demonic entity that has possessed the body of an innocent young woman, while her family restrains her. Ed and Lorraine were the ones to alert the church to the possession after meeting her during an audience chat session that was held at the conclusion of one of their public presentations. During portions of the exorcism when prayer is done, you can hear the demon acting wildly, and it originally refuses to give its name, both of which are quite common in cases of demonic possession. Eventually, we learn that there are 4 demons possessing our victim, with one of them identifying themselves as Robert, which happens to be a name associated with the son of Satan. I'll let a snippet roll now, allowing you to hear the woman for yourself. In 5th place, we have a satanic idol. This story began in 1991 when a deer hunter was walking through the woods in Connecticut, close to where Ed and Lorraine resided. The hunter got lost and after some time stumbled upon a raised, circular rock formation formation with the idol in question standing in the middle of it. It is believed that the formation was common with folks who practiced devil worship in the 70s. The hunter began to feel uncomfortable and left the area, deciding to make his way back to his car, and along the way he noticed an elderly gentleman walking alongside him who was dressed in head-to-toe black. The man in black never spoke a single word to the deer hunter. Now the hunter was getting more nervous by the second, and also more lost and unsure of his directional path. Desperate, he turned to the mysterious figure and simply asked, "How do I get out of here?" Luckily for our narrator, the man in black pointed in a direction and then disappeared. The hunter was so thrown off by that day that he reached out to Ed, who requested to be brought to the same area. Now the hunter wasn't 100% sure he could find the exact location, but was willing to try. Together, the two men were able to stumble through the forest, and without the aid of the man in black this time, found the rock fountain. Ed removed the demonic idol from the area and placed it in the museum, and that's when things got a little weirder. Approximately 3 days after removing the idol, Lorraine collapsed for no known reason, and she was transported to the hospital where no one could identify what was wrong with her. Thankfully, after 3 more days, she recovered. Now Ed believed that this was caused by the gentleman in black, who was believed to have been a high priest in a satanic cult, as a form of payback for removing the satanic idol. In 4th place, we have a Conjuring book. So one night, after returning home from a night out with Ed, Lorraine was reviewing the calls left on the answering machine when she found one from a distraught woman who introduced herself as a Mrs. Sandy Foster, who nervously described a very distressing situation and begged the Warrens to return her call. So even though it was like 12:40 in the morning, Lorraine immediately tried to call her back, and while the phone rang continuously, the connection was broken. Lorraine tried a few more times, going so far as to contact the phone operator and the operator's supervisor, who ran tests on the phone line and frustratingly didn't find anything weird. The next day, when the Warrens returned home from church, Lorraine immediately phoned the Foster home again. This time, Mrs. Foster answered the phone on the second ring and mentioned that the phone had never rang the night before, and Lorraine made the decision to go pay the Fosters a visit that afternoon. She and Ed arrived at around 2 p.m. and met not only Mrs. Foster and her husband, but also their 3 offspring, Abby, Joel, and Hannah, who had experienced most of the phenomena. Ed arranged his recording gear on a nearby table while Lorraine asked her permission to walk the house, which she was immediately granted. Mrs. Foster brought up that her daughter Meg, the 3 offspring Abby, Joel, and Meg, who had experienced most of the phenomena. Ed arranged his recording gear on a nearby table while Lorraine asked her permission to walk the house, which she was immediately granted. Mrs. Foster brought up that her daughter Meg had always been interested in the occult and had purchased a book on Conjuring as a gift for Meg, and based off of the description Ed gave of it, I believe it was a copy of the Ars Goetia. Now Meg admitted to attempting to summon a few of the spirits in the book, but had lost hope because nothing had happened. Ed prompted further, asking for specifics on the experiences that had happened in the last week when only the younglings were home. So, let's set the scene. The boys were already in bed, and Meg had just taken a shower. After going downstairs to make sure the doors were locked and, the lights were off, Meg returned upstairs to the sounds of running water, and the faucets had turned back on without any human's touch. Now downstairs, the lights and the radio had turned back on as well. Meg went downstairs and watched the radio dial moving on its own. After turning it off again, she got halfway up the stairs when she felt an icy cold hand touch her on the shoulder, just for a second in the dark. Now Meg bolted up the rest of the stairs, into her room, shut the door, turned off the lights, and hid under her covers. Outside the door, sounds of heavy footsteps caused her to suddenly shake under her covers. And then, more noises joined in with the mysterious steps. A door downstairs slammed shut, accompanied by furniture being pushed around and crashing, almost as if an angry person had broken into remodel. When Meg was able to open her eyes again, she saw a silver light come out of the woods and glide into her room. The next thing she knew, some hand yanked her hair 3 times. Each time it pulled harder, until the 3rd time it made her eyes water. Now, she ran into her brother's room for safety, and he confirmed that he was also terrified by hearing the assorted unknown noises, accompanied by loud whispering he could not make out. The duo eventually gathered enough courage to call their parents at the home they were at, but by the time the adults returned, all of the paranormal action had paused, and they were convinced the offspring were making it up. On the second occasion, everything that happened was almost the same as the first, but this time they involved the family dog, who was snarling at something that no one could see. Now, Joel remembered it as strange because the dog was deaf and could barely hear noise. So when the Wards were hiding in a bedroom on this occasion, instead of a silver figure, they saw a dark purplish cloud that they were unable to look at directly. So Lorraine at this point had returned and reported that she had experienced an inhuman presence throughout the home and asked Meg if she possessed, black conjuring candles in her room. And when she responded yes, Ed told the family that he and Lorraine can handle everything, but they should maybe head out for a drive while it was happening, for safety. Ed and Lorraine got to work the moment the Fosters left, determined to discover the true nature of the spirit's presence in order to dispel it. For provocation purposes, Ed used a crucifix and holy water, scattering the water at all 4 points of the cellar floor, and saying aloud, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command all spirits, whether human or diabolical, to leave this dwelling and never return." On the first floor, Ed repeated the same procedure in each of the rooms. This process, known to any exorcist as binding, requires the infesting spirit to either show itself or move on. Having bound the cellar and all downstairs room without incident, the Warrens were ready to approach the second floor, where they knew difficulty was lurking. But as they prepared to act, a telepathically projected feeling of dread came over them, which is a distinct indication of an inhuman demonic presence. They pressed on and began climbing the staircase to the second floor. But as hard as they tried, neither Ed nor Lorraine could get any more than halfway up. Pushing against them was some impenetrable, unyielding force. So slowly, the Warrens backed down the stairs so as not to be knocked over backwards. And at the bottom of the stairs, for a brief second, diabolical laughter rang out. So, annoyed, Ed threw more holy water on the stairs, which caused the pressure to diminish enough to let them reach the top. They were able to bind almost all the rooms without incident, saving Meg's for last. Ed swung the door wide open, and he and Lorraine immediately felt the need to take a step back from the horrible sense of misery emanating from the room. With a steely composure, Ed walked into the room, cross in hand. Though no physical presence was there to be seen, the bedroom was freezing cold. One last time, Ed threw holy water in all four corners of the room, commanding, "Give us some sign of departure or an exorcism will be conducted here this very day." Almost instantly, the morbid sense of misery began to drain away, and the temperature in the room gradually returned to normal. So Meg's bedroom did contain those black conjuring candles, occult vestments, and books containing the rites for rituals of all sorts. Ed placed the items in the gal's trash basket, set them out in the hallway, and then sealed the room by reading a prescribed prayer of sanctification. He brought them back to his home for safekeeping, and that's one copy of the Ars Goetia I have no need to read. Thank you. See? I've told y'all, don't summon beings! In third place, we have a shadow doll. Among one of the first haunted items visible to those who visit the Warren Occult Museum is a shadow doll, which boasts bird feathers and a genuine human tooth, and she's just overall terrifying to look at. I'm calling it now, she better join that TV universe one day. For reference, a shadow doll is a statue or deity of sorts that is made specifically for harm to be used at the center of curses. I happen to know the steps for the most common curse, and while I'll leave out a step for safety, I promise I'll elaborate. Now, the caster would first need to take a picture of the doll, write a curse on the back of the photo, and then send it to whoever the curse is aimed for. You know, hopefully you've got their mailing address. The person who receives the picture with the curse will sadly invite that curse into their lives. Oh, almost forgot. The doll is also going to appear in that person's dreams, so enjoy your nightmares, folks. While not too much is known about the origins of this specific doll, it was initially purchased in a secondhand store under the assumption that it was simply, an antique. I've got a couple of old dolls myself, and I'm shuddering to think about what they would do if activated by any kind of curse. Some of them talk enough already. In second place, we have Black Magic Mask, which is a concept in theosophy, mysticism, and the paranormal, of a materialized thought form, typically in human form such as an imaginary friend or being that is created through spiritual practice and intense concentration. In simpler English, the masks act as a representation of the practice, which is a form of mysticism that involves creating sentient and autonomous beings separate from oneself. The concept of tulpas and their creation, including the word tulpa, come from a closed Tibetan Buddhist practice, with tulpa being a Tibetan word for a creature of the mind. Tulpas did not become part of Western paranormal lore until around the 1970s, and those who practice have been cited as wearing masks similar to Halloween ones in order to take on the appearance of whatever the mask looks like. If anyone is curious about modern practices and appropriations of tulpamancers, the interweb origins can be traced back to 4chan message boards in 2009, and I'm not going to elaborate on just how awful that sentence was to utter. Oh, it gets worse. The communities gained popularity when adult fans of My Little Pony started discussing tulpas of characters from the Friendship is Magic television series. The fans attempted to use meditation and lucid dreaming techniques to create imaginary friends. Well, I think that about sums that up, don't you? In first place, we have the Black Lace Veil. So after one of their many public lectures, Ed was conversing with a couple that had been in the audience, where the boy introduced himself as Alan and explained that he'd brought his girlfriend Lonnie to the lecture because he suspected that she'd been overtaken by some occult influence. He explained that when his girlfriend became angry, her features would change into something resembling a wolf, and then the voice of a different person would speak from inside her. When Lorraine walked over to join the group, Lonnie experienced an episode of instantaneous possession and lurched out in an attempt to attack Lorraine. This incident terrified everyone in the vicinity, with the Warrens ending the audience chat session immediately, before Ed escorted the couple to an offstage room while Lorraine stayed outside. In the backstage room, the girl was fully under possession, breathing heavily, and her facial features had transformed into the wolf-like appearance the boy had talked about. After about 10 minutes, the possession passed, and Lonnie was lucid enough to explain, dealing with memory loss, along with losing hours and days of her life over the last 3 months, which is a symptom common in possession. She went on to share that originally her now boyfriend, Alan, had refused all of her advances and bribery attempts at becoming hers, and she had resorted to visiting a store prominent in selling tools to help with witchcraft, purchasing there a book on the black arts, and later that night performing a ritual for acquiring lovers. This ritual involved, you guessed it, the black lace veil, on top of which she placed a crown of goat horns before renouncing God and in her baptism, along with swearing allegiance to Satan, finishing the ritual by washing down the vow with a cup of animal scarlet elixir. About a month after Lonnie performed the ritual, Alan began paying her the attention she craved, making her entitled world perfect. What she hadn't counted on, however, was that she was now in debt to the demonic, having given them permission to enter her life. Ed knew immediately that Lonnie would have to undergo an exorcism as soon as possible, and made contact with a priest the next morning, who was able to come assist with the procedure. Upon arrival, the priest insisted on testing the spirit, so he instructed Lonnie to close her eyes and slowly count to 20, while his assistant stood behind her and placed a cross around 6 inches behind her head. The entity possessing the girl suddenly went wild, screaming, "Take it away! It burns! Take it away!" During the exorcism, it kept screaming, "She's mine! She's mine! Her soul is mine!" in reference to Lonnie. It was eventually separated from Lonnie, but just before it departed, the thing vowed it would return to another. The Warrens brought the black lace veil, goat horns, cup, and the Conjuring book home with them so she would be safe from repossession, but the tale of the veil doesn't end here. Months later, when Ed was in a meeting with a lady who was manifesting different personalities, some male, some female, and some that couldn't even be called human, but all making extremely threatening statements, her eyes began to wander, and when they landed on the black veil, she jumped up, grabbed the veil, and clutched it to her chest. Her features immediately began to transform into those of a wild, sneering creature, distinct from the otherwise attractive girl. Ed drew 2 vials of water to himself, one unblessed, the other blessed by an exorcist, and moved away from what was no longer this woman, but an inhuman spirit, a lesser devil of hell. Horrid moaning and various animal sounds came from the girl as Ed blessed her, banishing the demon away for now a second and final time. And that brings us to the end of our list, and I'm glad all of those items are still kicking around the Warren Museum for safety and not out in the open. In 5th place, we have the Bija Thomas Octagon House. Mr. Thomas was a rather wealthy man who owned a farm, several textile factories, and also dabbled in land surveying. He just couldn't keep himself out of monetary debt, and therefore there are several court records bearing his name, which outline some of his personal assets. Among his personal assets were 12 servants. It is rumored locally that he not only mistreated them horribly, he killed some of them on the property and inside the house. Now, after the passing of Mr. Thomas and his wife, and after the house had passed through the hands of his many children at some point, in the early 1900s, the house became a residence again. Now, during this time, it was apparently difficult to keep any one person in the house for any length of time due to the haunted nature. According to the documentation on this property, no one actually lived in the house any later than the late 1930s. During the 50s, the house became just another building used for storage before being condemned sometime in the late 60s, early 70s. Witnesses say the house is haunted, especially in the dark room or storage room. Apparitions of shackled, injured servants and red fluids dripping down the walls have been reported, along with a feeling of being cold in the storage room. In 4th place, we have the Abbey of the Black Hag, locally known as St. Catherine's Abbey, or simply as Old Abbey. It's located roughly 2 miles east of the village of Shanagolden, in the townland of Old Abbey. One of the earliest recorded nunneries in Ireland, with its first official record being around 1298, it was built on land donated by John Fitzthomas, and has the typical layout for abbeys of its time, with the dining hall, cells, isolated meditation areas, and other rooms still being able to be identified amongst the ruins today. Now, during the 15th century, there was a major battle for supremacy in the area, between the Earl Fitzgerald and the prestigious Butler family, of which the Earldom of Ormond belonged. It got to such an extent that the local bishop was known to pray for peace between the families at masses. During one of the nightly attacks, Earl Fitzgerald attempted to get his wife to safety, but as he was pulling her onto his horse, an arrow pierced her thigh, shattering the bone and spraying red bodily fluids. As he rode on, the Countess appeared to have succumbed to her injury, leading the Earl to seek sanctuary at St. Catherine's. The heartbroken man was certain his wife had passed, so he swiftly buried her beneath the altar and continued elsewhere to find safety. As the night went on, the nuns and residents began to hear hair-raising screams and made the decision to rebury the Countess in hopes of bringing her peace. When they dug up the body, they discovered that her fingers were broken and her nails had been torn off. The poor woman had been buried alive, with a very slow and torturous end of her life. To this day, it is believed that the Countess has been unable to find peace and continues to scream in anguish, waiting for her husband to save her from a fate truly worse than death. Now, moving slightly ahead in time, we come to the Black Nun herself. Described as one in the order that wasn't content with being humble, helping others over herself, and the servitude to God, she instead craved power. The hag had her own cell, where she worshipped Satan and performed black magic, becoming a slave to the occult. Now, this was the highest form of blasphemy in the church, and the other nuns in the order fled the abbey, while the hag remained in her, well, now House of Darkness. To complete her rituals, the Black Nun would venture into the local community and perform depraved, lewd acts and offer sacrifices, with bones of young community members later discovered on the grounds. In modern times, visitors have reported seeing the dark, shadowy figure of a nun wandering, the feeling of being constantly watched, and a disembodied hand reaching towards them. It has been reported that flashlights cannot function in the nun's cell, and modern batteries drain way too quickly to have any sort of rational explanation. Now, in third place, we have the Vampire of Highgate Cemetery. In 1967, two teenage girls were walking home along the nearby Swains Lane, claimed to have witnessed the dead rising from their graves by the cemetery's north gate. Another teenager had been awoken one night with something cold and clinging on her hand, which left prominent marks the next morning, while reports circulated of a tall man in a hat walking the area before melting through the cemetery's walls. On Halloween night of 1968, a group of teenagers interested in the occult visited Tottenham Park Cemetery at a time when it was being regularly vandalized by intruders. According to a report in the London Evening News, on November 2nd, the teens arranged flowers taken from graves in circular patterns, with arrows of blooms pointing to a new grave, which was uncovered. A coffin was opened and the body inside disturbed, but their most macabre act was driving an iron stake in the form of a cross through the lid and into the chest of the corpse. In a letter to the Hampstead and Highgate Express on February 6th of 1970, David Farrant wrote that when passing Highgate Cemetery on Christmas Eve of 1969, he had glimpsed a gray figure, which he had considered to be supernatural, and asked if others had seen anything similar. Sean Manchester claimed David's gray figure was a vampire, and the media quickly latched on, embellishing the tale with stories of the vampire being king of the vampires or of practicing black magic. See, that kind of intrigues me. King of the vampires? I'd be on the first flight to meet him. A rivalry grew between David and Sean, with each claiming that he could and would expel or destroy the specter. Sean declared that he would hold an exorcism on Friday the 13th of March, which, hey, that's a pretty good spooky date for that sort of thing. ITV conducted interviews with both men and others who claimed to have seen supernatural figures in the cemetery, which were transmitted early on the evening of the 13th, and within 2 hours a mob of hunters from all over London and beyond swarmed over the gates and walls into the locked cemetery, despite police efforts to control them. Now, a couple of months later, on the 1st of August, the charred and headless remains of a woman's body were found, not too far from the catacomb, believed to have been used in a black magic ritual. David was found by police in the churchyard beside the cemetery one night in August, carrying a crucifix and a wooden stake. He was arrested, but when the case came to court, it was dismissed. Now, there was more publicity about David and Sean when rumors spread that they would meet in a magician's duel on Parliament Hill on Friday the 13th of April in 1973, which never occurred. Now, in second place, we have Michael Taylor's home in West Yorkshire. In 1974, Michael's wife, Christine, stated to a Christian fellowship group to which they both belonged that his relationship with the leader of the group, Marie Robinson, was carnal in nature. Michael admitted that he felt evil within him and eventually attacked Marie verbally, who screamed back at him. Now, during the next meeting, he received an absolution, but his behavior continued to become more erratic. As a result, the local vicar called in other ministers experienced in the deliverance of preparation to cast out the demons residing within the man. The exorcism, which occurred between the 5th and 6th of October 1974 at St. Thomas's Church in Gobber, was led by Father Peter Vincent, the Anglican priest of St. Thomas's, and was aided by a Methodist clergyman, the Reverend Raymond Smith. According to Bill Ellis, an authority on folklore and the occult in contemporary culture, the exorcists believed that they had, in an all-night ceremony, invoked and cast out at least 40 demons, including those of incest, bestiality, blasphemy, and lewdness. In the end, exhausted, they allowed Taylor to go home, although they felt that at least 3 demons were still left in him. While at home, Taylor brutally ended his wife Christine by attacking her with his bare hands, tearing her eyes and tongue out and almost tearing her face off. At his trial in March, Taylor was acquitted on the grounds of insanity. He was sent to Broadmoor Hospital for 2 years, and then spent another 2 years in a secure ward in Bradford before being released. In first place, we have the Bell Witch in Tennessee. In the early 1800s, John Bell moved his family from North Carolina to the Red River Bottomland in Robertson County, Tennessee, settling in the community that later became the present-day Adams, Tennessee. One day in 1817, John was inspecting his cornfield when he encountered a strange-looking animal sitting in the middle of a corn row. Describing it as having the body of a dog and the head of a rabbit, John fired several times at the being in shock when the animal simply vanished. He thought nothing more of the incident until later that night when the family began hearing thumping sounds outside the walls of their log home. The mysterious sounds continued each night, always growing louder and more forceful. In the weeks that followed, the Bell children began waking up frightened, complaining that rats were gnawing at their bedposts, their bed covers were pulled from them and their pillows tossed onto the floor by an invisible entity. As time went on, the Bells began hearing faint whispering voices, which were too weak to completely understand, but sounded like a feeble old woman singing hymns. The encounters escalated, and the Bells' youngest daughter Betsy began experiencing brutal encounters with this invisible entity. It would pull her hair and slap her relentlessly, often leaving welts and handprints on her face and body. The family had kept the disturbances a secret until that point in time, but this led to them sharing their story with their neighbor, James Johnston. Now, skeptical at first, and I can't say I blame him, James and his wife spent the night at the Bell home. Things began peacefully, but once they retired for the evening, they were subjected to the same terrifying disturbances that the Bells had been experiencing. After their bed covers were yanked off and James was slapped, he sprang out of bed, exclaiming, "In the name of the Lord, who are you and what do you want?" The entity didn't respond for the rest of the night, so it was pretty peaceful for them. Now, the next morning he explained to the Bells that the culprit was likely an evil spirit, kind that the Bible talks about. The entity's voice strengthened over time and became loud and unmistakable. It sang hymns, quoted scripture, carried on intelligent conversations, and once even quoted, word for word, 2 sermons that were preached at the same time on the same day, but 13 miles apart. Word of the supernatural phenomena soon spread outside the settlement, even to Nashville. Then Major General Andrew Jackson became interested in the so-called Bell Witch in 1819, decided to visit the home to investigate. As Andrew's entourage, made up of several men, well-groomed horses, and a large wagon approached the Bell property, the wagon jolted to a sudden stop. It had become stuck in a muddy creek bed, and the horses were unable to pull it. Well, at least that was what the men thought. After several minutes of cursing and trying to coax the horses into pulling the wagon, Jackson proclaimed, "By the eternal boys, that must be the Bell Witch!" And suddenly, a disembodied woman's voice told them that they could proceed, and she would see them again later that evening. You know, totally not ominous at all. They were then able to proceed across the property, up the lane, and to the Bell home. Now that night, one of the men claimed to be a witch tamer, saying his silver bullets would end any evil spirit they came into contact with, and the entity would fear him. Now, as your friendly narrator, I can see where this is going. Can you? So immediately after that stupid comment, the man screamed and began jerking his body in different directions, complaining that he was being stuck with pins and hurt severely. A strong, swift kick to the man's, lower area from an invisible foot sent him out the door. To the shock and surprise of no one, the entity was angry and announced that there was another fraud in the group, but she'd wait until the next night to identify him. Now terrified out of their minds, Andrew's men begged to leave the Bell farm. He insisted on staying. He wanted to know who the other fraud was. Now what happened after that isn't super clear, but Andrew and his entourage were spotted in nearby Springfield early the next morning, going back to Nashville. He later proclaimed, "I would rather fight the British at New Orleans than fight the Bell Witch." The entity continued to express disdain for John Bell, relentlessly vowing to end him. Now John had been experiencing episodes of twitching in his face and difficulty swallowing for almost a year, and it grew worse with time. By the fall of 1820, his declining health had confined him to the house, where the malicious entity continuously removed his shoes when he tried to walk, and slapped his face when he recovered from his numerous seizures. Her shrill voice was heard all over the farm, cursing and chastising Old Jack Bell, which was the nickname she had given him. John Bell breathed his last breath on the morning of December 20th, 1820, after slipping into a coma the day before. Now, immediately after his passing, his family found a vial of strange black liquid in the cupboard. John Jr. stupidly sprinkled 2 drops onto the cat's tongue. The cat jumped into the air, rolled over in midair, and had passed before it hit the floor. The entity then exclaimed, "I gave old Jack a big dose of that last night, which fixed him." John Jr. then tossed the mysterious vial into the fireplace, where it burst into a bright blue flame and shot up the chimney. Now, over time, young Betsy Bell became interested in Joshua Gardner, a young man who lived nearby, and with the blessings of their parents, they decided to marry. Everyone was happy about their engagement. Well, almost. The evil, mysterious entity became furious and repeatedly ordered Betsy not to marry Joshua. The young couple couldn't frequent the river, the fields, or the cave to play without the entity nagging them. The constant pressure was more than Betsy could handle, and on Easter Monday of 1821, she met Joshua at the river and broke off the engagement. Shortly after that, the entity visited her mom, Lucy, and told her that it was leaving, but it would return in 7 years. And the entity returned in 1828, as promised. Now, most of the 3-week return visit centered on John Jr., making predictions of the future. The entity that tormented the Bell family and the Red River settlement almost 200 years ago is often blamed for the unexplainable manifestations that occurred near the old Bell farm today. The faint sounds of people talking and children playing can sometimes be heard in the area, and it's not uncommon to see candlelights dance throughout the fields late at night. Photography is especially difficult. Some pictures taken in the area show mist, orbs of light, and other phenomena, including human-like figures who were not present when the pictures were taken. The cause of the Bell family's torment 200 years ago, along with today's continued discontinued phenomena in the area remain a mystery. Numerous theories have all been put forth, but have also all been debunked. Most researchers agree that something had to have caused the incidents at Red River in the early 1800s that gave rise to the Bell Witch legend as we know it today.
Number 4. The Museum Tour. If you want to go to the world's foremost collection of haunted relics and cursed objects, there's probably no room more affected by evil than the legendary collection of the Warrens' Haunted Museum of souvenirs from their case files. Now sadly, as of this recording, the museum is currently closed down and hopefully reopening someday soon, but in the meantime, you can take a little digital tour. As this footage posted by the Warrens' son-in-law, Tony Spera, shows Ed Warren giving a guided tour of some of the more unique and memorable haunted artifacts resting in that Connecticut garage. Now the full video is definitely worth a watch if you're a fan of the Warrens, since it's about as close as you'll be able to get to walk around the museum these days. It's a full half-hour long of Ed Warren walking around, going into grand detail and recounting some stories about their more notable cases. Some shoutouts I'll include real quick include the witch Hannah Cranna, an old Connecticut legend, or the Conjuring mirror, which might sound like it has something to do with the movie series, but actually refers to a bizarre case where someone used the mirror in a ritual to try and summon a demon and ended up inviting a poltergeist into his house. Ed talks briefly on some of their favorites, their cursed dolls and toys, such as a dinosaur from the Devil Made Me Do It case, and of course, no visit to the Warrens Museum could possibly exclude mention of Annabelle, who's basically the star attraction of the place and probably why anyone knows who the Warrens are and what keeps the lights on for so long. Annabelle is shown under a tight lock and key as Ed goes over her history of how they brought her in and first found her and how they eventually contained her. He touches briefly on her protocol, how she has to always be locked up in a storage box behind glass, surrounded by rosary beads and doused in holy water in an effort to keep the evil inside of her tucked away. And just a quick little small aside here from me. If a spirit is so powerful and so malevolent that it's able to possess a doll and contain unspeakable evil and attack humans, how is it thwarted so easily by a little bit of glass? I mean, I guess it's still a doll, it doesn't get demon strength, but I didn't know the solution for dealing with demons is the same way you deal with like a dog that's being kind of troublesome. You just put something around them until they can behave. Anyway, moving on.
Number 5, The Exorcist. Technically, I'm not about to start talking about the set of the classic 1973 horror film directed by William Friedkin that launched Linda Blair into stardom. You know, the film that tells the story of a young girl who is possessed by a demonic force. One of the, highest grossing horror films of all time. Critics have rightfully praised it as a truly terrifying film experience. But instead, how about we talk about the crazy true story behind the film? So back in the late 1940s, a boy known by the alias Roland Doe was mourning the death of his aunt, who had taught him about spiritualism and how to use a Ouija board. I can already see the danger in this situation, and that's without using movie context clues. Specifically, in January of 1949, the family reported hearing strange dripping noises and scratching sounds in the house. So at first, Roland's mother believed the noises were connected to the dead aunt, and the family started trying to reach out to the spirits they believed to be in the house, hoping they could reason with them, and asked to be left alone. To the shock and surprise of nobody, this only made things worse. Roland claimed he could hear someone walking in his room at night when he was trying to sleep, and there were scratch marks found on his mattress in the morning. And eventually, scratch marks began appearing on his body. The family converted to Catholicism and tried to have Roland baptized, but the boy responded to their baptism attempts with unbridled rage. At one point, Roland was admitted to a hospital where a psychiatrist attempted to treat him, but was ultimately unsuccessful. The family was out of options, so they called upon priests to perform an exorcism, one of which was Father William S. Bodern. At one point, he attempted to protect Roland through blessings and by putting a crucifix under his pillow. After leaving Roland to rest, the family returned to find furniture flipped over and the crucifix moved to the edge of the bed, and Roland's mattress was shaking uncontrollably. While the exorcisms were performed, young Roland vomited, urinated, spit, and spoke in Latin in a deep, adult-sounding voice that was unfamiliar. Honestly, this sounds like a case that would have been right in the Warrens' niche, so it's wild knowing that they didn't investigate it. Number 4, The Bell Witch in Tennessee. One day in 1817, John Bell was inspecting his cornfield in Robertson County when he encountered a strange-looking animal sitting in the middle of a corn row. Describing it as having the body of a dog and the head of a rabbit, John fired several times at the being in shock when the animal simply vanished. He thought nothing more of the incident until later that night when the family began hearing thumping sounds on the outside walls of their log home. So the mysterious sounds continued each night, always growing louder and more forceful. In the weeks that followed, the Bell descendants began waking up frightened, complaining that rats were gnawing at their bedposts, their bed covers were being pulled from them, and their pillows were tossed onto the floor by some invisible entity. As time went on, the Bells began hearing hearing faint, whispering voices, which were too weak to completely understand but sounded like a feeble old woman singing hymns. The encounters escalated, and the Belle's youngest daughter, Betsy, began experiencing brutal encounters with the invisible being. It would pull her hair and slap her relentlessly, often leaving welts and handprints on her face and body. Now, the family had kept the disturbances a secret until that point in time, but this led them to, share their story with their neighbor, James Johnston. Hey, he was skeptical at first, and I can't say I blame him, but he and his wife spent the night at the Bell home to see if they could figure it out. Things began peacefully, but once they retired for the evening, they were subjected to these same terrifying disturbances that the Bell family had been experiencing. After their bed covers were yanked off and James was slapped, he sprang out of bed exclaiming, in the name of the Lord, who are you and what do you want? The entity didn't respond and the rest of the night was peaceful. So the next morning he explained to the Bells that the culprit was likely an evil spirit, the kind that the Bible talks about. The entity's voice had strengthened over time and became loud and unmistakable. So now it was singing very loud hymns, it was quoting scripture, carrying on intelligent conversation, and once even quoted, word for word, 2 sermons that were preached at the same time on the same day but 13 miles apart. Word of these supernatural phenomena soon spread outside of the settlement, even to Nashville, where then Major General Andrew Jackson became interested in the so-called Bell Witch in 1819 and decided to visit the home to investigate. As Andrew's entourage, made up of several men, well-groomed horses, and a large wagon approached the Bell property, the wagon jolted to a sudden stop. It became stuck in a muddy creek bed and the horses were unable to pull it. Well, at least that's what the men thought. After several minutes of cursing and trying to coax the horse into pulling the wagon, Jackson proclaimed, "By the eternal boys, that must be the Bell Witch." And what do you know? A disembodied woman's voice told them that they could proceed, and she would see them again later that evening. They were then able to proceed across the property, up the lane, and to the Bell home. That night, one of the men claimed to be a witch tamer, saying his silver, tiny, little things would end any spirit they came into contact with, and the entity would fear him. Now, as your friendly narrator, I can see where this is going, can you? Yeah, immediately after that stupid comment, the man screamed and began jerking his body in different directions, complaining that he was being stuck with pins and hurt severely. A strong, swift kick to the man's lower area from an invisible foot sent him out the front door. To the shock and surprise of absolutely nobody, the entity was angry and announced that there was another fraud in the group, but she'd wait until the next night to identify him. Now terrified, Andrew's men begged to leave the farm, but he insisted on staying. He wanted to know who the other fraud was. What happened after all of that isn't super duper clear, but Andrew and his entourage were spotted in nearby Springfield early the next morning, going back to Nashville. He later proclaimed that he would rather fight the British than fight the Bell Witch. The entity continued to express disdain for John Bell, relentlessly vowing to end him. John had been experiencing episodes of twitching in his face and difficulty swallowing for almost a year, and it was only growing worse with time. By the fall of 1820, his declining health had confined him to the house, where the malicious entity continuously removed his shoes when he tried to walk and slapped his face when he recovered from his numerous seizures. Her shrill voice was heard all over the farm, cursing and chastising old Jack Bell, which was the nickname she had given him. Now, John Bell breathed his last breath on the morning of December 20th, 1820, after slipping into a coma a day earlier. Immediately after his death, his family found a vial of strange black liquid in the cupboard. John Jr. stupidly sprinkled 2 drops on the cat's tongue. The cat jumped up into the air, rolled over in midair, and had passed before it hit the floor. The entity then exclaimed, "I gave old Jack a big dose of that last night," which fixed him. John Jr. tossed the mysterious vial into the fireplace, where it burst into a bright blue flame and went up the chimney. Over time, Betsy Bell became interested in Joshua Gardner, a young man who lived nearby, and with the blessings of their parents, they decided to marry, and everybody was happy about the engagement. Almost everybody. The evil, mysterious entity became furious and repeatedly ordered Betsy not to marry Joshua. The young couple couldn't frequent the river, the fields, or the cave to play without the entity, bothering them, and the constant pressure was more than Betsy could handle. And on Easter Monday of 1821, she met Joshua at the river and broke off the engagement. Shortly after that, the entity visited her mom, Lucy, and told her that it was leaving, but would come back in 7 years. And it did. In 1828, as promised. Most of the 3-week return visit centered on John Bell Jr., making predictions of the future. Now, this entity that tormented the Bell family and the Red River settlement almost 200 years ago is often blamed for unexplainable manifestations that occur near the old Bell farm today. The faint sounds of people talking and young folks playing can sometimes be heard in the area, and it's not uncommon to see candlelights dance through the dark fields late at night. Photography is especially difficult. Some pictures taken in the area show mist, orbs of light, and other phenomena, including human-like figures who were not present when the pictures were taken. The cause of the Bell family's torment over 200 years ago, along with today's continued, chaos in the area, remains a mystery. Numerous theories have been put forth, but all have been debunked. However, most researchers agree that something had to have caused the incidents at Red River in the early 1800s that gave rise to the Bell Witch legend as we know it today. Weird that Ed and Lorraine didn't visit there. Number 3, the Vampire of Highgate Cemetery. In 1967, 2 girls walking home along the nearby Swains Lane claimed to have witnessed the dead rising from their graves by the cemetery's north gate. Another teenager had been awoken one night with something cold and clinging on her hand, which left prominent marks the next morning, while reports circulated of a tall man in a hat walking in the area before melting through the cemetery's walls. On Halloween night of 1968, a group of teenagers interested in the occult visited Tottenham Park Cemetery at a time when it was being regularly vandalized by intruders. According to a report in the London Evening News on November 2nd, the young folks arranged flowers taken from graves in a circular pattern, with arrows of blooms pointing to a new grave, which was uncovered. Now, a coffin was opened and the body inside was disturbed, but their most macabre act was driving an iron stake in the form of a cross through the lid and into the chest of the corpse. In a letter to the Hampstead and Highgate Express on February 6 of 1970, David Farrant wrote that when passing Highgate Cemetery on Christmas Eve of 1969, he had glimpsed a grey figure, which he considered to be supernatural, and asked if others had seen anything similar. Sean Manchester claimed David's grey figure was a vampire, and the media quickly latched on, embellishing the tale with stories of the vampire being a king of the vampires or of practicing black magic. Now, a rivalry grew between the two guys, with each claiming that he could, expel or destroy the specter. Sean declared he would hold an exorcism on Friday the 13th, which, we love that. And a lot of TV outlets conducted interviews with both men, and, others who would claim to have seen supernatural figures in the cemetery, which were transmitted early on the evening of March 13th, and within 2 hours, a mob of hunters from all over London and beyond swarmed over gates and walls into the locked cemetery, despite police efforts to, control them. Some months later, on August 1st, the charred and headless remains of a woman's body were found not far from the catacomb, believed to have been used in a black magic ritual. Now, David was found by police in the churchyard beside the cemetery one night in August, carrying a crucifix and a wooden stake. He was arrested, but when the case came to court, it was dismissed. There was more publicity about David and Sean when rumors spread that they would meet in a magician's duel on Parliament Hill on Friday the 13th of April in 1973, which never occurred. But once again, like Ed and Lorraine never ever looked into this case at all. Mind-boggling. Number 2, devil worshipping. Technically, I'm cheating a little on this case, and sadly it was after the passing of Ed Warren, but Lorraine chose not to consult on it, making it perfect for our list. So Danielle Harkins, who was a 35-year-old schoolteacher near St. Petersburg, Florida, started acting strangely in June of 2012, developing an interest in demonic rituals, and soon after was arrested for the harm of 7 of her former students. She had told them they needed to rid their bodies of demons as the group gathered before dusk around a small fire near the St. Petersburg Pier. They should cut their skin to let evil spirits out, and then burn the wounds to ensure that those spirits would not return. Which, ow! When Harkins held a lighter to one person's hand, wind blew the flame out, which prompted her to douse his hand in perfume before setting it on fire. Obviously, he suffered second-degree burns. Another person was cut on the neck with a broken bottle, and Harkins used a flame to heat a small key, which he then used to, cauterize the wound. The police were notified because a friend of one of the students who participated in the ritual raised alarms. However, none of the students themselves told their parents about the event or would comment following the arrest of Harkins for aggravated battery and harm. Honestly, I wish Lorraine would have helped with this case to provide answers for everybody. Number 1, the Winchester Mystery House. In 1886, an eccentric widow left her home in Connecticut for California's rural Santa Clara Valley to start a new life after the tragic loss of several family members. If you're unaware of the story, this was the tale of Sarah Winchester, a millionaire heiress who managed her own finances and acted on a passion for architecture and design by overseeing the never-ending construction project of a rambling mansion in San Jose. Her reclusive lifestyle, along with the restrictive gender norms of the era and the cursed money she was associated with, caused neighbors and local press to speculate, and legends quickly began to swirl about the mysterious woman and her bewildering house. Even though, it was like a modern marvel at the time with indoor plumbing, multiple elevators, a hot shower, and central heating, the mansion was appraised as having no value because, it had doors that opened to nothing but thin air, staircases that led straight into the ceiling, and a maze of labyrinth-like hallways. So naturally, legends began swirling, speculating that the bizarre architectural choices were an attempt to rid the home of unwelcome spirits of the dead killed by the Winchester rifle. And here's the reason I've mentioned it today. Even though I felt like this would have been a must-visit during Ed and Lorraine's travels, I couldn't find any record of them having anything to do with this residence. A cursed home constantly being added on to cater to the spirits and zilch? Obviously, they must have known something we don't to have never visited there.
Number 4, Ed Warren invoking a spirit on camera. Coming up next is this video uploaded by Tony Spera, the Warrens' son-in-law, on his personal YouTube channel. If you're a fan of the Warrens and you're not already, I would recommend subscribing to Tony Spera. He puts all sorts of Warren-related clips up on the channel, and it's fun. Now, it's hard to say much about this particular video because it was uploaded without a whole lot of context. The video doesn't really mention a date, a location, or a case, or anything else like that. It's a bit troublesome because the Warrens have said to have worked on hundreds of cases over the years, so this could be any one of them, or maybe it's just one of the lesser, less exciting cases that got pushed to the side. They can't all get made into movies, Now in the video we can see Ed filming what looks like a fairly normal 70s living room, although the room is definitely haunted. You can tell right away from that liminal yellow wallpaper color. You can hear Ed Warren yelling out the name of Jesus Christ in an attempt to provoke the spirit into appearing. It's said that during an exorcism, to get a spirit or a demon or a ghost to reveal itself, you need to invoke the name of Jesus Christ, put a little fear of God into him. After about a minute of some serious invoking, it seems like Ed is finally getting through to the spirit, because we see the table and chairs slide across the ground as if they're being pushed backwards by some incredible invisible force. Now, we don't really see anything more exciting or spiritual than the chairs and tables getting pushed, but that's pretty exciting nonetheless. There's not a ton of footage from the Warrens while they were, working the field, so it's pretty exciting to see whenever we get opportunities like this though. Of course, I do hear you saying this could just be faked. So is this the footage of a ghost caught on camera, or is this nothing more than a faked video to drum up some attention back in the day, like an original CGI hoax video on TikTok? Number 3, driveway alien. Ed and Lorraine Warren got involved in all sorts of things. It's said that they've tussled with vampires, with werewolves. Now, we don't have it on 100% authority that they ever encountered aliens, but they definitely could have. They researched everything. So let's take a look at this weird video of what looks to be a visitor from another world touching down on the driveway. You wouldn't expect aliens to make first contact in Colorado, but hey, here we are. In this video, we can see a really scrawny little creature walking up and down Vivian Gomez's driveway. The creature had people talking because, well, take a look at it. Just what is it? It almost looks like it's got giant ears flopping around when it moves, and I'm not gonna lie to you, it reminds me a lot of Dobby from Harry Potter, so maybe he just got a sock and he's just celebrating his happiness and he's excited to be free. The woman whose driveway caught the security footage, one Vivian Gomez, had this to offer when she posted it on Facebook. So I woke up on Sunday morning and saw this on my camera, and I'm trying to figure out what the heck. First, I saw the shadow walking from my front door, then I saw this thing. Has anyone else seen this on their cameras? The other 2 cameras didn't pick it up for some reason. Sadly, her security camera only films for about 10 seconds or so this is the only footage that she was able to capture of this mysterious driveway creature. Gomez clarified for everyone that whatever it was wasn't her son. Okay, we weren't thinking that, but now we're definitely not thinking that, because she doesn't let him out by himself that late, although that opens up a lot of questions. She saw something strange running around her driveway at night and considered the possibility that that might be her son. Like I said, I'm pretty sure the most likely possibility is that this is a freed house elf excited for the future, or a very confused alien. Could be an alien that just touched down. Maybe a Terminator traveling through time. That's why it looked naked. Gang, you let me know what you think what this mystery monster could have been down below. Number 2, Jharkhand. Coming up next is a clip out of India that went viral last year and captured the attention of paranormal enthusiasts, alien hunters, and skeptics alike. I like when you can get everybody all in together and like that. You see something weird on camera, we're like, is this an alien? Is this a ghost? Is this a demon? I'm not sure, but let's all take a look at it. A strange humanoid-like figure was spotted walking across the road in India, confusing everybody. Whatever it was filmed walking alone steadily on a bridge at night in Jharkhand in eastern India, staggering around through the night. Now the thing looks human, and my brain initially is like, yeah, that's a human. But the more you look at it, the more you start to wonder if maybe, just maybe, this might have crawled out of something. This creature is gangly, and it has these long arms and long pale white skin and very skinny, and it looks like something out of Silent Hill. Motorcyclists were swerving out of the way of this figure, which stops and stares at them for a bit before continuing to stroll onwards. Now naturally, this got people talking, because it's not every day you see a terrifying pale figure like that. More than a few people suggested that it could be an alien walking around the streets at night, explaining why it seems so confused. Others suggested that it could be a ghost, which would be pretty spooky. I would say it does seem like it's physically present. It seems like it's physically on the road, so I'm not 100% that it's a ghost. And finally, there's the realists who have suggested that this could just be someone who had a long night and is lost and on all the substances right now, just trying to get a good night's sleep. As far as I know, no one has cracked this case, certainly not Ed and Lorraine Warren, so we may never have a satisfying answer. And number 1, the Buddhist exorcism. It wasn't just the United States where Ed and Lorraine Warren worked on their cases. If there was a call for it, the Warrens would do their best to answer. Plus, I don't know, I feel like if you only hunt ghosts in one country, then you're missing out on just so many good demons and ghosts out there. If you're a fan of the channel, and I hope you are, then you know by now just how many amazing, interesting regional monsters, myths, and cryptids there are all over the world. You could spend your whole life battling demons, but have you ever gone toe to toe with an Oni or a yokai, something like that? Well, maybe that's why the Warrens decided to take a trip out to Japan in the early 2000s. Maybe they wanted a vacation and a change of pace, or maybe they were looking to challenge themselves. They set out to Japan to investigate these allegedly haunted tunnels, where a number of people were reported to have died in. Ed was a World War II Navy veteran and had spent a lot of time around Japan and was fascinated in their culture and the things that he had seen while stationed there. Of course, hardly a vacation, because while they were there, they were asked to participate in a Buddhist exorcism of a young woman named Teresa who'd become the unwilling host to a litany of demons. They were aided by a group of Buddhists during the exorcism, which is probably a change of pace from their usual ordained Catholic ministers. In the clip, we can hear Lorraine doing her level best to try and cast the evil out of the young girl's body. The clip is a bit hard to watch, and that's coming from someone who watches ghost videos literally every single day of his life. You're watching someone writhe around screaming in what looks like agony. But hey, luckily they were being tended to by the experts. Ed and Lorraine Warren spoke very highly of the Buddhist monks helping them as well, saying they were cut from a different cloth. I'm not sure if that's a pun or not. I feel too, if they ever start running out of ideas for the Conjuring movies, they should definitely start sending the Warrens international. Conjuring in Japan, I already feel like that's a good premise for a movie. Or maybe, and bear with me here, the Conjuring movies should get way more wild. We already know they're only based on true stories, they're not real stories, so just have them fighting Godzilla or whatever. I would love to see Ed and Lorraine Warren try and exorcise Godzilla. You let me know who you'd love to see Ed and Lorraine go toe to toe against. I'd want to see what they could do with Freddy Krueger too, personally.